Turn your Bibles to Mark chapter 5. Mark chapter 5, starting at verse 24. And a great crowd followed him and thronged about him. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 long years, and who had suffered much under many physicians. He's been all she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard reports about Jesus and came up behind him in a crowd and touched his garment, for she said, "If I only touch even his garment, I will be made well." And immediately the flow of blood dried up. She felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" And his disciples said, You see the crowd pressing toward you, yet you say, "Who touched your garments?" And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and much trembling, and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And Jesus said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." I want to talk today about a welcome interruption. A welcome interruption. You know, I don't know about you, but it never fails. I can be doing nothing in the house, and then suddenly, the minute I really get into something, the minute I really get in a phone conversation, the minute I start to get into my sermon preparation or doing something or into a TV show, my boys will have something to say. They have something to tell me. But they chose not to do it when I wasn't doing anything. No, they wait till I do something. They begin to interrupt what I'm doing. And sometimes the interruptions are good. Sometimes not so much. For example, a good interruption, they have spiritual questions, and they want to ask me about God, and they talk to me about the school, or what they're doing, or the desires and wants. In our text, Jesus gets interrupted by a woman with a flow of blood. Now, what happens in the context, first, Jairus approaches Jesus and he pleads with him to heal his daughter. He pleads with him, "Please, Jesus, heal my daughter. She's about to die." Then on the trip to heal Jairus' daughter, Jesus is interrupted by this woman with a flow of blood for 10 to 12 years. She has a hemorrhaging for 12 long years. In our text, we see three things. First, we see she needed an interruption. She needed an interruption. Second, that interruption was aided by faith. And not only faith with that interrupt, but not only faith, but also worship. First, look with me in verses 24 and 26. And a great crowd followed him and thronged about him, and there was a woman who had a flow of blood, a discharge of blood for 12 years, and who had suffered much under many physicians and spent all she had, and was no better, but rather the first. The first thing we see is that this woman needed an interruption because of her suffering. The suffering was first internally. She had suffered for 12 long years. Imagine, just imagine, for 12 long years, never a day off. Every single day she would wake up, she would have a flow of blood coming from her. This was long. There was never a time in this 12 years where she did not have a flow of blood. Women, imagine that you're on your cycle for 12 years. Imagine the pain. Imagine what this woman would have felt. Imagine. She never had a day off. Never had a day off of the pain that she went through. Imagine. Not only was her suffering long, but it was also expensive. We understand how this woman would have felt. When there is no remedy, when there is nothing to help, when there is nothing to alleviate the pain, and we'll go through extreme measures. I can imagine that when she first had this hemorrhaging, when this first happened, I can imagine in year one, she was hopeful that it would end, praying to God that it would end. But as the years went by, her hope dissipated, and until she's at the point right now where the hope of having any type of healing from this disease is almost like a little mustard seed. And we understand, and this cost her everything that she had. Everything that this woman had, she spent trying to get relief from this pain, from this hemorrhaging. You know how it is. When you're going through pain, you want the pain to alleviate. You want it to go. You go to doctor after doctor, and you're hearing the book, and you're hearing people say, they'll help you, only to find out failure after failure. You're willing to go through risky procedure after risky procedure, only to find out it only gets worse. Until you find one day you spent all you had, and there's nothing, and you're now in poverty. This woman suffered. She needed an interruption, right? She needed an interruption that would help to relieve her pain. Some of you have pain that you're going through, and you need Jesus to come through. I'm here to tell you, Jesus will interrupt your life. Jesus will do some things that you never thought he would. But not only was her suffering internal, her suffering was external. This is a Jewish community. By law, when a woman was on her cycle, she was to be put outside the camp. Jewish law declared you unclean. So imagine, for 12 long years, you have this pain, you have this hemorrhaging, this flow of blood that will not go away, and you have to do this alone. You have to do this alone. This woman was outside the town where nobody could see her. That means that she was away from. So it's obvious that she didn't have a husband. So she would have been single. She doesn't have any family or friends because they thought that even if I were around her, even if I touched her or I'm around, I would be contaminated and I would need to be purified. This is think any of us could ever imagine how hard this would have been. How hard this would have been. Some of you are going through some serious suffering right now. Some of you are struggling right now. You understand what physical suffering is. Now, you may not have hemorrhaging for 12 years, but you understand that there are some things that you are going through that you need Jesus to come step in on, right? For some of your parents, you've tried and you've tried to have kids, and you've done everything. You've tried fertilization, you've tried that. You've tried medication, you've tried everything, and nothing seems to work. There's mornings and then there's nights where there's just tears. And you're praying, God, I want a child too. It may not be for you the fact of wanting to have kids, but you could have seizures, and there's no control in it. When you wake up one morning and you just start convulsing, you have to call 911. There's nothing. There's no control. It can pop up whenever you want, and you try the medications, you try things like Dilac, you try things like Depakote, you try things like phenobarbital, but nothing seems to work. And they haven't got the right mixture of medicines that fit you right. And you need Jesus to come in and help you so you can live like at least a semblance of what everybody else does. It may be not a child or seizures, but your bipolar disorder. You want control. You're tired. You're tired of going from one extreme mood swing to the next, only to have your life tossed to and fro by the waves. You've tried medication, but it's just, they haven't found the right one for you. And you need God to come in. You need Jesus to come in and intervene. I'm telling you, Jesus will come in and intervene and interrupt your situation and give you the relief. You just have to yield to Him by faith, just as this woman did. Now, this interruption was aided by faith. This interruption was aided by faith. Look with me in verses 27 through 29 and then 34. She had heard reports about Jesus and came up behind him. The crowd and touched his garment, for she said, if I touch even his garments, I will be made well. And immediately the flow of blood dried up. She felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease. Here's the thing. This woman didn't see anybody healed, but she heard it. She heard the reports. Faith comes by hearing. And hearing. She heard the reports that Jesus was in town. She heard the reports. Now she heard reports before. She heard the reports. This doctor will help you. And only to come out with disappointment after failure. She's heard it all, but for some reason, she heard these reports and something was different. Something was different in her life. Something, not doubt, but faith. Not hopelessness, but hope. that even if I just touch his garment, if I just touch his garment, I'll be healed. Not that I might be healed, but I'll be healed. Faith is the conviction that God will do what he says he does, regardless of what I've experienced, regardless of what I see. God can and will do the impossible. That is what faith is. That is what faith is. Maybe you are experiencing, maybe you have something that doesn't look like God's going to work it out, but he is. It doesn't, from your previous experience, it doesn't. If I were to go on my previous experience, but something inside tells you, something inside that God is going to work it out, that God is going to turn this thing around. For some of you, you've tried, you've wanted to get married so bad. So bad you wanted to get married and you've had failed relationship after failed relationship, and you're right about to give up in the towel. My word to you is don't have faith. God is going to turn it. God's going to turn this around. It could be your child. Could be your child is addicted on drugs and they've gone to rehab. You've heard this song and dance before, but there's something about this. Something about this. It's different. I'm telling you, don't give up hope. It might not be that. It might be your wayward child. They've gone to church all their life. They didn't walk down the aisle, but they reject Christ. They do not believe the gospel. They are atheists. Don't give up on them. Have faith. God can turn even them around. And maybe your marriage, you may be ready to throw in the towel. You said, I tried. I've done everything I could. My word to you, don't. Have faith. God can turn it around. And maybe that prayer that you have been praying night and day, that God will work something, and you're about to give up. And my word to you is don't give up. Don't give up on. Don't. God can turn it around. This woman not only believed the reports, but she acted upon them. I said she acted upon them. Faith is not merely an intellectual exercise. Faith is not just something cognitive, if you will. Faith, as the Puritans said, is an act of the mind, heart, and the will. Faith, it requires us to be active. Any belief that you claim you have, if you are not active, is not biblical faith. It's not biblical faith. This woman, she heard the reports. And I can imagine there's a big, huge crowd, and she says, I gotta touch him. If I just touch the hem of his garment, if I just touch it, this wasn't something that she just thought in her mind, but she acted. And when she touched it, she was healed. She was healed. My question to you, what is God calling you to act upon? Is it that new relationship that God is telling you, just give this a try? I'm in this one. Is it the marriage that you're about to give up on? The marriage God's telling you, don't give up. Don't give up. Is it that family member that you've been praying for? That you ain't seen any fruit whatsoever, and God's saying, don't give up on them? Is it your child that did addiction that you're just ready to accept that my child is always going to be addicted to drugs and there ain't anything I can do about it? And God's telling you, don't give up. Is it your wayward child that you don't want to give up, but those years of praying for your child doesn't seem to have any type of fruit whatsoever, and you're ready to just throw your white flag? Okay, I'm done. God ain't going to save my child. God's telling you, don't give up. This is that prayer that you've been praying for night and day, that you don't see anything, any type of proof from previous experience or even now. And God's telling you, don't give up. Don't give up on that prayer. Don't give up on that prayer. Her needed interruption was not only aided by faith, but it was also aided by worship. Look with me in verses 30 through 32. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, who touched my garments? And his disciples said, you see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, who touched me? And he looked around to see who had done it, but the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and much trembling, fell down before him and told him the whole truth. Jesus is on his way to heal Jairus' daughter. I can imagine Jairus goes to Jesus and says, Jesus, can you heal my daughter? Jesus is walking, and there are hundreds of people all around him. There are hundreds of people around Jesus, and the disciples have to almost push the people out, and people are touching Jesus all over, and this woman with the flow of blood, who we don't know her name, here's Jesus in town. And she sees Jesus, and she goes and she touches Jesus, and she says, if I just touch the hem of his garment, if I just touch the string, I will be made clean. I will be made well. I will be made new. And it's in that instantaneous moment that she touches his garment. And she realizes she's clean. The blood isn't flowing anymore. I can imagine it at that instantaneous moment where she touched him and she realized tears were just falling down her eyes because she realized the pain that she went through for 12 long years. She no longer has to go through with this. But at the same time, Jesus is walking. And the woman touches him and he stops. He stops immediately. And he says, who touched me? Who touched me? The disciples are turning and they're looking at him like, are you insane? Everybody is. perusing around the crowd, saying, who touched me? He's perusing the crowd right now. Who is coming to me in faith? Who has something that I need to interrupt into their life? And he looks around at the crowd. He's trying to find. And this woman has her head down, but then she lifts up. She sees eye to eye with Jesus. Tears are just rolling down her eyes. They're probably at a distance, I would think. Probably a couple feet. And she begins to look at him. And she's shaking, she's trembling. Why is she trembling? Because she has reverence for what has just happened. What has just happened is an impossibility. It's a God thing that only God can accomplish. She's reverent. Her hands are shaking because what she's longed for 12 years now has happened. And she realizes that it's an act of grace. An act of grace where God healed her. She didn't do anything for it. She didn't earn it. She didn't pay for it. But God did it. He healed her. This reverent awe that overcomes somebody when they're encountered with the Almighty. And the Almighty does what you never thought that He would. The Almighty does what you do and what you've been praying for. You have this reverence. But not only did she come to Him in reverence, but she's submissive. It's as she's walking closer to Jesus, trembling, and as she gets face to face with Jesus, she drops to her knees. And she's saying, thank you, Lord. Thank you. And she tells him her story. He said, for 12 long years I've had this suffering. Nobody could help. I thought God had left me out. I thought I was a baby. Doctors couldn't help me nothing. Thank you, Lord. Thank you for healing me. Thank you for doing the impossible. And she said, I heard the reports, and if I just touch his garment, I will be made well. I will be made well. That is what this woman was and is. And now her walking is not for her or for Jesus, it's for everybody else. So that they know that Jesus welcomes your interruptions when it comes in faith. We need to hear that as well, because we got some things we need God to take care of. No. We need God to interrupt our situation. Whether that's a marriage, whether that's a relationship, whether that's thoughts in my brain, I got some suffering that I need God to take care of, that only God can take care of. And when we come to Him in faith, when we come, like this woman, we come in faith and worship, we'll get the declaration that she got. Your faith has made you well. Your faith, the faith that doesn't come from you, it's a gift from God that you have not earned. The faith to believe God's promises, and God's promises amidst unbelievable impossibilities. Let us come and worship God. Let us come and worship Him for doing what only He can do, interrupting our lives. And our response is faith. Faith. I said faith and worship. Faith and worship. So our text, be soft, please, we think. First, the woman needed an interruption. The woman needed an interruption because of suffering. That interruption was aided by faith and also worship. Let me leave you with the Lord's benediction from Numbers chapter 6. Starting at verse 24. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make His face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace. And in Espanol, Jehová te bendiga y te guarde. Jehová haga resplandecer su rostro sobre ti y tenga de ti misericordia. Jehová alce sobre ti su rostro y ponga en ti paz. You may leave with the Lord's benediction and our hope this week that He will interrupt your life so that